I'm Sonia Azad. Welcome to The Shift, a place to inspire growth, resilience, and wisdom, real connection, healthy conversation as we navigate life's changes and challenges together. Because, as I like to say, we are all each other's teachers. Thanks to our friends at A New Life Story Coaching for making this podcast possible. Hair and makeup generously provided by Glam House Collective.
Hi there, I'm Sonia Azad. Thank you so much for joining us for The Shift. We're at Dallas Irby today, and I'm here with Dr. Kate Mangona. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me, Sonia.
Yeah, this is really cool. We've actually never met before. This is our first time meeting in person. But what I find so cool about you is that you're a pediatric radiologist, and you have this expertise in marriage, relationships, money. Tell me about all of this. How did this happen?
Okay, well, during the beginning of the pandemic is when I really discovered my love for coaching and really learning about relationships, because it was a tense time for everybody, right? Like our worlds were turned upside down. And my husband and I decided to not even live with each other because of COVID. And he works with immunocompromised pediatric patients treating their cancer. I work in the hospital. We didn't want to give each other COVID. This was the first month before we knew anything.
Yeah.
So we lived apart for those couple months, and those were the hardest months of our marriage. I think because just tensions were so high, and when we saw each other, we were in masks. And I'm a deeply emotional person, and he is a deeply data-driven Excel spreadsheet, show me, the studies person. And I believe in studies too. I'm a physician, but so when I realized we had this kind of disconnect, I started going to finding group coaching programs. And I started getting coached about my feelings and about marriage. And it opened my eyes to this whole nother world and this whole other perspective that I didn't realize was going on inside of me. And I started turning my negative bias thoughts and really evaluating them and giving him more of the benefit of the doubt than I had been. And then I discovered my love for it. Before I became a pediatric radiologist, I actually did consider psychiatry. And so I always had this deep love for emotions and relationships. And I just became so fascinated with it. And it became my mission to help other people, especially in mental health, in healthcare, or other physicians around me, because that's a lot of people who are in my circles with their relationships. I'm there is an answer, guys. There's solutions. We don't have to live in resentment or anger or frustration.
Yeah. Tell me about how you and your husband met.
We met the first day of residency.
Oh,
yes. It was in Michigan at Beaumont Hospital. And I think we were in line to get our colorblind testing and urine tests. And there was something about him. There was this aura about him. And he asked me, not long after that, he asked me for my email and my phone number because he was compiling a list of all the residents. And he wanted to, he wanted everybody to go out. And I will tell you, I was actually in a very, very serious relationship with somebody else at that time. So I became friends. Even I fell in love with him, but then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. So I distanced myself for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And our residency was 5 years. So I distanced myself from him. We were friends, acquaintances. And then as I grew older, because I was very young when I went into residency, I did this shortened med school undergrad program, 6 years instead of 8 years. And I just felt, I was just naive. I was a late bloomer. And then once I realized he was the one for me, I was like, oh, what have I done? But luckily,
go get him.
The sparks were still there, and he was still waiting for me.
Oh my gosh. Wow. What a story. And you guys have 3 kids now.
We have 3 kids.
How old are they?
Just turned 2, just turned 4, and about to turn 6.
Whoa.
And a poodle. Our fur baby was our first baby.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like from the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you probably sleep, you are constantly navigating relationships, with just every single person in your face, and relationships of all sorts, because you have your spouse, and then, your children, people who need you, right? And then also your patients.
The coworkers.
Yeah.
I am a radiologist, so I tend to work in the dark room behind the computer, but I interact with a lot of radiologists. Other clinicians who come into my dark room or call me on the phone, I do interact with patients, but it is to a lesser degree. Like I'll go in and do a quick procedure and then go back to my room. But I interact with a lot of technologists, other physicians, trainees, residents, fellows, medical students.
And then just like your friends, your family.
Friends.
Yeah. Random people, strangers.
Yes.
What do you find is the most challenging? I feel like everyone is kind of on a short fuse right now. I mean, you mentioned this during the pandemic, and it's like maybe that brought it to light, but I feel like there's a lot of anger, right? Like in the news, we hear a lot of stories about road rage. Like people, I just call it a short fuse because that's the best sort of description I have. What's going on out there?
I feel like we don't know how to deal with our emotions, and we don't give other people the benefit of the doubt. Like we don't, like when we're on the road, we're not thinking, oh, they're going to be late for the third time and this is it for them. You know, then they may not have a job anymore. We might be thinking maybe they're rushing to the hospital. Like we're not giving them that benefit of the doubt.
Or they just spilled coffee on their leg. That happened to me today. You know, so then it's like someone's honking at me and I'm like, just hang on a second, sorry, you know. But that's true.
And we have no patience. We're in a society where we get everything, you know, and we just like, let's just breathe. You know this.
Take a breath.
Close your eyes.
Yeah. So patience and then learning how to navigate your emotions. I mean, you did coaching, so like you sought it out. What do you tell people who are like, what do you mean navigate my emotions? Like people are probably listening to this going, what is she talking about?
Yes, no, that's kind of a very general way to talk about it. You have to get specific. So my clients that come for me for coaching, I ask them, what is the specific incident? Like, what's the problem here? Like, what's preventing you from whatever their goal is? And then they start talking about, oh, well, every time I come home from work, my husband's sitting on the sofa and the kids are...
It's other people. It's other people. The problem is always the other people.
Yes.
Right?
And then that's what they think attributes to their anger, their frustration. And they don't realize it's really what they're thinking about their spouse, what they're thinking about their kids who are leaving a mess, what they're thinking about their empty refrigerator. Nobody else, you know, does the food prep or the grocery shopping or cleaning besides them, you know? So they think other people are the source of their feelings or emotions.
When in fact, what is it?
It's our thoughts. It's a story we're telling ourselves, right? So like I could come home and see the house a complete mess, and my husband's on the sofa on his phone, and the kids haven't eaten dinner yet. And I could be like, oh my God, they had an amazing day. Like, look at all the toys they played with. My husband's probably shopping for the next bike that my 6-year-old just grew out of her bike. He's on Amazon, and the kids are, look at their independent playing. I could be thinking like that. Or I could be like, oh my gosh, I have a deadbeat husband. My kids are so irresponsible, so ungrateful. And of course, it's always me who has to make the food.
I feel like I almost started laughing the first scenario because I'm like, but sometimes no one's thinking that. No one's thinking that, oh, my husband's like shopping for a bike for the kids. Look at these kids, just what a great day they had. No one's thinking that. How do you get into that? How do you shift into that mindset?
Okay. How do you shift into it? It's not a snap of your fingers.
No, of course not.
So it's really figuring out why. Like, again, why? Asking why 10 times. Where is anger coming? Because they're going to keep pointing fingers. Well, because he did this, because she did this. And you have to process it. And sometimes when you come home and you're feeling angry at the mess and the uncooked dinner and him on his phone, you have to be like, okay, like I'm angry. Affect label it, right? Label it. And just validating your own emotions, because nobody else is validating for them, can help. And then asking yourself, what does my family need right now, beginning with me, right? And it's not being selfish. It's taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your family that brings more joy into your life. So you have to figure out, what do you need? Do you need to start cleaning up the toys and making the dinner? Or do you need to go upstairs, take a shower, decompress? Sometimes I like to organize my closet for 10 minutes. Or some people sit in the car, right, for 10 minutes and talk for a friend before they come in, because they've trained themselves to enter calm so that the anger doesn't wash in, or the frustration.
Well, okay, so wow, so many questions here. If you identify that you are angry, let's say, what do you do with that anger? So that's the next question. That's the next why for me.
Okay.
And what do you do?
So there are 4 things you can do with any emotion.
Okay.
You can react, so yelling or shutting down. You can suppress, which is just like pushing it away, and actively pushing away. You can deny, or avoid, which is completely avoidant, like you don't even know it's there, or just pretend it's not even there, which is different than suppressing. Or the 4th thing you can do is allow. And that is just to allow yourself to be angry. And no, you don't have to start doing anything. You can just sit with that emotion. Where do I feel angry? In my chest, in my throat? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Does it have a vibration? And people don't do this unless they have a coach or somebody in front of them, right, walking them through this. And it's very, very hard in today's society because we don't do this, unless you turn on a meditation app.
Yeah. Well, I'm just picturing like someone sitting in their anger being like, okay, so it's like, I see red, I'm angry, I want to punch a wall. Okay. But so this is like what you have to do. Either write it down or you talk to someone, and then you can identify patterns. Once you identify patterns, we get to change the story, change the narrative, take you out of the emotion. Is it true that emotion, right? Energy in motion move through us, and they usually say like 90 seconds, and then like the emotion's gone, but it's up to you to like actually remove yourself then next.
Yeah, emotions definitely move through us. And you can feel that, like when you're sad and you've got that lump in your throat and it eventually dissipates and gets softer and leaves. The amygdala fires for about 20 minutes.
Okay.
So that's when you're just like, that's in your state where you're the fight, flight, or freeze state.
Yes.
And so when somebody's in a relationship and they can't think straight because their amygdala is firing with that primal emotion, I say give it 20 minutes.
Okay.
And that means 20 minutes of walking outside, 20 minutes of listening to music, 20 minutes of cooking if that's your thing. But that's 20 minutes where you're not thinking about that other person. And you can't be thinking about the event. You can't be ruminating. So I think that's the magic number to let your amygdala kind of stop taking over you. It's called amygdala hijack. And I feel like when you train yourself the more you train yourself to do is the easier it gets. So allowing that anger, it's not like every day you come home and you feel that anger, so you've got to name it and color it. Like you just get better at it. And eventually we can feel multiple things at once. We can be angry and we can be grateful and we can be joyful and we can be sad. Like we can feel, that's the beauty of being human.
Yeah. The next part of what I wanted to ask you is, I feel like we're sort of starting to describe neuroplasticity. So you're training your brain to not go down this path, but instead going down this path. And this is what I talk about a lot because of meditation and how that process is supported in or through meditation. So is that also what we're doing here through either your coaching, self-coaching, or with someone else?
I would say for sure.
Yeah.
You're rebuilding the way in which you, like the blueprint in your mind thinks about situations and scenarios. But it's like you're training your brain to think the way where you want to be. Like think about, we're very forward focused, right? It's like, if you want to stay in the past and dwell on the past, then okay, well, we're going to keep going in that same circuitry, like that same circle. But if you want to move forward, if you want to reach for extraordinary or more magical or more romantic, whatever it is, then you've got to work on building those pathways in your brain.
Yeah, and it's moving from, I call it kind of autopilot, like where you've been to where you want to be. Yeah,
Yes.
Very simply. I want to talk about this, navigating the relationship or shifting into relationship with children, because I'm in, a lot of friend circles where not only are they having children, but now the children can talk, and now the children can talk back, and now the children are like in different stages, right? And so how we communicate, as we know, is so important, especially when they're young. But while we're navigating all of these adult emotions and things that you're talking about, right, at work and at home and at play, then we're also dealing with this relationship with little people who require a lot of guidance and care and attention. And so what do you do? Do you as a mom, I'm sure you feel crazy sometimes, but how do you set that aside, or do you, when you're trying to manage these relationships with these young people who need you?
Yeah. So when I started getting coaching, I got a lot of parenting coaching because I love babies, right? When they can't talk, when they're just like cuddly and they're breastfeeding. And once my daughter turned into a toddler, it was like, I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I felt like I turned into a monster because as a physician, I'm very controlling, right? Like I want things to be a certain way, and you can't control little people. You just can't. They've got minds of their own, and you don't want to control them. You know, you want them to blossom and grow and be the people they're supposed to be. And so the same thing. I learned when I was getting frustrated during bedtime when they will not go to sleep. And people are like, oh, they're really good at manipulating you. Or they're the reason, you know, why you can't go get your work done because they've dragged bedtime out to hours. Like, well, you know, maybe they're just acting like a normal 3-year-old. Actually, they are. They're acting like a normal 3-year-old. They're not manipulating me. They're just testing their limits. They're seeing what it's like to revert back to a 1-year-old and then maybe try and see what it's like to be a 3.5. Like they're only so little. Like they've never seen you are their superhero. You are their everything. And so I get very, very granular with them. We have books on emotions and feelings. So I think this is all very important. And we talk about this. And I've learned that my older daughter, she doesn't like when I label her feelings. Okay. She'll storm off and go be by herself, and she needs space.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
She'll go storm off to her bedroom, hide under the pillows or on the staircase, and she'll moan and groan, but I don't need to yell at her for that. I just need to allow her to go explore her mind and her space.
Yeah.
So I don't tell her, you're angry right now. She's just not ready. Whereas, you know, my 2-year-old, okay, it's totally okay to tell her, okay, I can see her frustrated, but when she's full out tantrum, just let her tantrum.
Yeah.
And then I'm not going to give into it by giving her what she wants. I mean, we could go on this whole with different age. Yeah. We could go on forever.
Well, but like what's interesting about what you're saying, and I don't have kids, so I have learned, I cannot really speak about any of this in terms of my own opinion, but a lot of people who are, you know, older generation, old school, are like talking about kids' feelings, tell them to shut up and like, you know, right? We're being too soft with these kids and all that. What do you say? Because I mean, you're a physician. I mean, you see all sorts of people and you interact with all sorts of people. And I think like these fundamental years that we're talking about, 2, 4, 6, that shapes how these people will interact in all of their relationships ahead.
That's very like 80s, 90s parenting, I feel like. But I don't remember my mom ever telling me to shut up or not listening to me when I needed to be heard or when I wanted to be heard.
Did you grow up in this country?
I did.
Yeah.
Yep, I grew up in Kansas.
And, okay, yeah. And your parents are both from America? Okay.
My mother is Latina, so I have grandparents who are from Mexico and Spain.
Okay. So how she grew up is different.
Yes.
Slightly, yeah, right?
How she grew up was very, very different.
And I think that's important to note.
Yeah. But she was also an early childhood education, like she was a teacher.
Got it.
So she was very in alignment with learning and teaching and working with little kids. And she blocked out most of her childhood, I would say. Besides she had amazing siblings and they all worked through it. And she did have amazing parents too, like at the root of it. But like the traumatic experiences, she blocked out. And I feel like when somebody tells me to shut up, or if I were to tell my kids to shut up, that would completely that teaches them to not come to me when they really need me. And I want to have of course I'm the parent, you know, I'm the one who's the responsible one and who's going to have to guide them to make the right choices, whatever right choices that is, like stay away from, you know, drugs or things that aren't healthy. But I feel like, yes, I'm not about telling your kids what to do.
I mean, you scroll on TikTok for 5 seconds these days and you see parents like I feel like it's like really shaming their kids. And I'm like, whoa. I mean, people are, I look at the comments because I'm like, I'm just observing, I'm observing human behavior is like my fun time.
Yes, me too. Me too.
Yeah. And so I'm like, wait, so is it funny to see this kid crying? And then like the parents are like, yeah, you tell them, stuff like that. Yeah. And I feel bad because these kids are trying to express and explain themselves in these situations where parents are either like just being really stern or even harsh. And so I'm like, what is this teaching our future generations? And I guess that's where my softness question comes in, is like, are we being too soft, or is talking about your feelings and listening to young people just how we should be living?
Yeah, and I feel like it's not just black or white. We get into this thing where we're thinking like all or none thinking. You can yell or you can be super gentle. And so it's not like we're letting our kids walk all over us. We're just having open conversations. We're still like, okay, you're not going to eat ice cream every night for dinner, or you're not going to go out with your friends until midnight every night. But we're having a very honest, open communication where they think of us as safe, right? So they can come to us when they are ready to talk. And I only have a 6-year-old, right? I don't have
beyond that
yet. But I can already see it. Like if I were to start yelling at her or telling her she wasn't allowed to do because I'm the mom, I make all the rules, I can really see her just not coming to me for things and finding her own friend group and doing things in retaliation almost.
I have friends who have daughters specifically who are a little older, who are really testing their boundaries. So what could any of us do really, whether it's dealing with a kid or not, when someone's testing our boundaries, what's the appropriate response?
I think, which boundary would that be?
Oh, Lord.
And
That's a great question.
Because we do talk a lot about boundaries in coaching too. And I like to get very specific, like, what is it? What's the boundary? And also like the definition of a boundary is like, if I have a boundary that if my kid is screaming at me that I'm not, or if they're pinching me, say they're, because I have some pinchers and I used to have a biter and a hair puller, that I'm not going to allow that. That's going to be a boundary for my safety, not really for theirs because they're not getting harmed, but it's my boundary for my safety. So I may just remove myself from the room. Mommy's going to go take a timeout in her room for 10 minutes because
you take the time out.
I take the time out.
Interesting.
And they get upset, right? Because I'm not leaving the house, but I'm going to a different room.
Correct.
And that teaches them, if they're going to pull my hair or pinch me or scream in my face, I'm leaving. So it's not, a boundary is not, if they're pushing my boundaries, that doesn't mean, and I do something because I have to live within my boundaries, it's not punishing them, it's keeping me safe. So that's a physical,
physical boundary. Yeah.
There's also emotional examples too. Like if you've got a kid who is, some older kids can say some really, really mean, hurtful things. If we interpret those words that way, right? Because we can interpret words differently.
Sure.
Then we set up that boundary. Oh, once you start saying that F word, that's my cue to go take my break or to go for a walk around the block. And that person needs to know that that's your boundary too. So it just doesn't come out of nowhere. And so there's confusion. So like there's an actually established boundary in that relationship.
Does that really work?
No, you just keep doing it.
Keep doing it. Okay.
You have to, once you set your boundary, it's for your own self, right? They eventually learn. It can take some practice and it may take shifting, but it's for you. It's not like a boundary is not a punishment against them. or a consequence for them.
It's about you. Okay, that makes sense. I do want to talk about the workplace because I think, this is a thing for a lot of people, like where they may like their jobs, but they don't like the people at their jobs, or they like the people at their jobs, but they see them so much that it almost becomes like family. And so then you start to treat people like they are family when they're actually not their coworkers. I meditate every morning. I try to when I'm entering a physical doorway, I'm like, okay, take a deep breath. I'm going to enter in the best possible way. But is there anything you do that you can recommend when, things are chaotic and you have to work at a super fast pace and maybe you're getting phone calls and emails and it's just one of those days,
Yeah.
So how do you navigate these workplace kind of sticky situations?
Okay. I will say, because I have done so much work with coaching and navigating my own feelings, I like almost everybody I work with, and I work with a lot of different personalities. But no, definitely, there are some times where I'll get very frustrated, or somebody's really pushing my buttons, on a phone call, whatever it is. They walk in, or maybe they called me in at 3 a.m. last night, and I didn't feel like it was medically necessary to call me in at 3 a.m. last night. But then I realize these things are things I have to deal with internally. And something I do is I love talking them out. Some people like journaling, some people like talking, and some people call it venting. Now, there's a difference between venting and actually talking it out with a colleague, whether it's that specific colleague or a different colleague who might be helpful. That's different than gossiping, right? We're not gossiping about that person that drives you nuts, because that actually creates more pain. And that keeps you in that cycle, that keeps you like that pawn in that chessboard, that you're stuck because everyone else around you is all of a sudden you feel like is teaming up on you or being evil. You're just giving yourself your own poison over and over again, unless you work it out in your own brain. So sometimes I will seek out a colleague who I know is going to be helpful, or they're not going to take sides, but I just need to work through this. Let me just work through this. And then in that, I'll hear my own thoughts, oh yeah, okay, that was reasonable. If I'm thinking about it from their perspective, because we tend to only think about things through our own lens, right? Through our own eyes. And if I can look at things through their perspective, things change a little bit.
Yeah, what you're talking about is empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's we hear that word, but we forget to put it into practice a lot of times. Whether we started talking about people driving, right, on the road, whether it's your child, you've also been a child at some point. Someone took care of you and dealt with your temper tantrums. You're talking about your spouse. You're talking about your colleagues. If we can just build a self-relationship with empathy.
Yeah.
Don't you think that things would flow a little bit nicer for all of us, right?
Yes.
What would you say is the best way that you take care of yourself and maybe kind of fill up, whether it's empathy or, we'll just call it self-care, right? What do you do for yourself that makes you a better human for all the people around you?
I'm very, very present when I'm home. I'm home most evenings with my kids. But I work very, very intensely. I work 3 days a week in the hospital. I work a couple days a week at home with clients or doing podcasting. And so I need that childcare. I don't want to be, and when I don't have childcare, that's when I become more irritated or angry, because I'm I want my kids to play quietly so that I can be focusing on this. No, I need to ask for help when I need it, so I can get my work done, which I love doing, but get it done so that I can be completely free and present when I'm not working. And that is part of my self-care.
You mentioned your podcast, and I do want to give people a chance to learn more about you, what you talk about, and where to find you. So tell me about that.
Sure. So it's Medicine, Marriage, and Money. Because I became a doctor first, and then I got married, and then I started making money. Medicine, Marriage, and Money. It focuses on relationships. We talk a lot about relationships with spouses, mostly, but we talk about relationships with in-laws, with children, and I'm very open when it comes to talking about money. So we talk about, how do you deal with finances in your house? Where do you invest your money? How do you spend your money? Where do you put your little free money fund? And yes, so we have a podcast and a YouTube channel. And that's
we
find me
can-
on Instagram, Facebook.
We can find you there.
Yes.
And you have a lot of great recommendations as well in terms of listening and reading. Any one that you want to share with us?
Okay, so I have 2. So if you're a parent and you have more than one kid, Siblings Without Rivalry is an amazing book. And anything that author, I don't want to say it wrong, but Siblings Without Rivalry, anything they've written, I think they wrote How to Speak So Kids Will Listen. But it's great. It's just, it's to set up a household where siblings eventually, well, they like each other now and they'll like each other in the future as well. Because sometimes we don't realize we're causing our kids not to like each other in the future.
Wow.
Because they think we're favoring one over the other by what look at, Susie's eating her vegetables. Why aren't you eating yours? Like, that's something we don't say. So that's a great book. Now, in terms of spouse and understanding your specifically husband or more masculine in your relationship, I would recommend Keys to the Kingdom by Alison Armstrong. It talks about all the phases that a man goes through in their life. They're very different than a woman. Extreme. We could go through 4 phases in one day. A man.
I was going to say 1 hour.
Yes, 1 hour. A man needs like 10 years.
Wow.
And we don't understand this. Like, there's very, very different feminine and masculine energy. So Keys to the Kingdom is an amazing book for that.
Dr. Kate, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so
I'm glad I got to meet you and start this conversation, because there's a lot more to talk about here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really,
It's such an honor
really
to be here.
appreciate it. And thank you guys for watching The Shift. I'm Sonia Azad. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. We really appreciate it. See you next time.
This podcast is sponsored by A New Life Story Coaching. Feeling stuck in life? Battling emotional hurdles and repeating familiar patterns? Are you yearning for a fresh narrative? Seek support at A New Life Story Coaching. We'll guide you in unveiling subconscious beliefs and emotional barriers, empowering you to script a life story that resonates with your true self. Embark on your transformation today by visiting anewlifestorycoaching.com. Your new chapter awaits. And don't forget about our friends at Glam House Collective. Let's get glam.